And hello everyone, welcome back to another Love2D tutorial. So, today we will be implementing the user score system. Then, say start new game, you'll see we have now two score systems there at the top. Once we blow up an asteroid, the score increases. Go here, we blow up the asteroid, it increases, and in here we no longer exist. So you just boom, and let me just boom. Cool. Now when we go back in, I think the score is no longer there. We'll implement that later. But the idea is, once we have the score implemented, the score should stay as it is. And then we will have a high score and a current score. The high score will be implemented in a different video. It's not that complex, so we'll probably do it near the end. Cool. And just as a comparison, this is what we currently have. Move this up here. We say new game. As you can see, we don't currently have any score to speak of, which is unfortunate. So that's why we'll be implementing it right now, because that's one of the things that really makes a player more happy to see, is if they play a game like this and they have a score, and they try and beat their score every time they play the game. Now, let's go to our globals.lua. Now, I'm going to assume you have LuaRocks installed. If you do not have LuaRocks installed, I believe you can just Google LuaRocks. Yeah, there we go. And then you can install LuaRocks. LuaRocks allows you to basically just install extra packages or extra files for you to use in your programs. So let's say you want to work with MySQL, which is something you use to work with databases. Then you can go to LuaRocks and you can download this MySQL package, and now you can work with MySQL in Lua. Or if you want to make a chat app, then you can get this Lua sockets, which allows you to basically chat or create a chat app. Now I'm going to assume you have this already installed. And if you don't, you can just quickly go and install it. Just pause the video, go and install it. It would be probably as simple as it was to install Lua, if not easier. Now, if you have it installed, make sure that you have the following in your path. You need to have LuaRocks in your path. So this should also be in the installation. If it isn't, you just have to implement or add it. You just say $, and in brackets, LuaRocks path -- bin. And this will allow LuaRocks to work. And you have to add eval here at the front before this. So if we just copy this, then you have to go eval. And every time you want to use LuaRocks, you have to do this. What you can do is you can say, you can go into your bashrc, and this runs every time you start up your terminal. And let me just run that again. Now if we go down here, and actually it's at the way bottom, so let me just full screen that. So here we go there. So this is inside of my bashrc file, which runs every time my terminal starts up. So every time my terminal starts up, we make sure I can use LuaRocks. So I recommend you do the same if you're on Linux. Now once you've done that, LuaRocks should work. Now to install what we want to install, we need to type LuaRocks install and then Luna JSON. This package will allow us to work with JSON, because I want us to save our file in JSON format. And you don't need to know JSON, I'll explain it along the way. A lot of people would actually prefer if you were to encrypt the save file, but I'm not going to go through all of that effort. It's such a basic game. That could be something you do on your own. But you might want to encrypt the save file so a player can't spoof how much they really got. For example, let's say they really only got 5,000 points in the game. Then you might want to encrypt the file so they can't just go into the JSON file and change that 5,000 to 50,000. but that's out of the scope for this tutorial. So we can just say install, and let's see here, and I do not have write permissions. I'm just going to go sudo and then try it again. You might want to use -- local if you have the same problem. I'm just going to go sudo just to keep things simple. Now once you have this installed, you should be good to go. Now let's go up here and we say local Luna JSON is equal to require Luna JSON. And we can use it just like with Love because we've installed it. So now we have this option here to use. Now we can create a function, and this function will be called read JSON, and it will read a JSON file for us. And in here we can just pass in the file name because we might have multiple JSON files we want to read. So this is just for future proofing. You don't have to necessarily add a file name here, but just in case you add another file that you wanted to read, then it easily reads that file for you. Now I recommend having all our files inside of a specific folder. So right here we can create a new folder and we can call it src for source content. This can be like your audio and your files and your images and whatnot. In this case we can just say data, and that should be a folder, data folder inside of the source folder, because this is where all our data files would go. Preferably encrypt your data files because this is usually things users should not be tweaking. And in here we can just say save.json because this will keep the save file or the save data. And then all we have to do is we have to use these curly brackets, and then we just have to say hi score like that, or if you want you can also use an underscore like that, but preferably don't use a space. That's not very good. So use an underscore or a capital case, but not a space. And you can just say 0, and this will be the score the user has. Save that, and you don't have to open this file for a long time. Cool. Now that we have that file, we can specify the file we want to read, so the file we need to open. So local file is equal to io for input output dot open, and we pass in the file path. So you can say src. So that would be this src file or folder. Then you want to go into the data folder, so /data, and then / because we want to access this save.json. We can then just go .. file name, and then .. because you might not want all of your files to be in .json format. You might have multiple formats. .json. Now this is just how I did it in a script, but because this is saying read JSON, you can just as well not have this here and just let them enter JSON. But because I just want to enter the file name, for example save, I just say that, then it will automatically add this .json for me, as you can see here. The end result will then look something like this, and all I had to do was enter save here, and it will produce this. And then of course here we just have to specify we want to open it up in read mode. Below that we can say local data is then equal to file : read, and we can just say we want to read everything. So star and then all. This will read everything inside of this file. And we can say file : close because we don't want the file to stay open. And in return Luna JSON .decode, and we can just say data. Now once you have done this, everything should be still working fine. If you want to test it, you can still run your code of Love. And make sure everything starts up, which it should. Cool. Now next up we can go to this game.lua file, because we now want to add the high score to the game, because we can now read this JSON file we have, but we want to have it display the score here. Now this JSON.decode here, before I forget, basically just converts JSON, so this right here, to a Lua object, so a Lua table. Now down here we can say score by default is 0. So by default, when you start the game, you get 0 as the score. This is the initial score for the game. And now here at the top, we also want to import save data. Because now we want to read this file, this JSON file. Then we want to pass in the save data into this game here. If you want to, you could load the high score and all of the save stuff inside of this game here. But for me, it's better to rather do it outside of the game, just to keep things simple. So if you might have different functions you want to pass the same data in, then you don't have to make multiple functions in each one of those. You can just pass it in here. But we'll get to that a little bit later. Then you can say high score is then equal to save data dot high score. And this here is just a table. It's just going to contain high score for the moment. If there's nothing there, we want to say or 0. So it will default to 0. Next, we want to go a bit down here to where it says draw, because we want to update the draw. We can go up here and say local opacity is equal to 1. Then if faded, then here we just want to set the opacity to 0.5. And now we can just work off of the opacity. So we don't need this if statement here anymore. We can then just unindent this. Actually, this can still be inside of faded. Why not? Because this should only be displayed if we're currently faded. Because only if we're faded, we're being paused. That's the only time currently the game is ever being faded out. So this can still stay in a if statement, now that I think about it. And because this should be above everything else, it should be at the bottom of this draw. If it's at the top, everything else is going to be above it. So it should be at the bottom. We can then go text to create new text we want to display. And you can just say colon draw. Then this text we want to say score. And this will be the default score the players see like when they start up a new game. Colon space and then add the self.score. Then we can position it -20, 10, and I don't think that's positioning. I can't actually remember what is everything inside of this text here. What are we doing? Okay, so first, oh yeah, so that is positioning for X and the Y position. Cool, okay. Then the font size, that will be an H4. We can say false and false, and the false and false is just for this fade in and fade out because we don't want it to fade in or out. Then we want to wrap with the line and the opacity. So the wrap width will be the width of the window. So love.graphics.getWidth. And then we can say right and then faded and opacity or 0.6. Now this is a little bit weird, but basically if it's faded, then show the opacity we have. Otherwise, just default to 0.6. And I believe you can actually go here into the Lua virtual environment and just test it out. So let's say we have X, which is equal to true. And we have 1, which is equal to, let's say 0.5. And then 2, which doesn't exist. So you can just say 2 is equal to 0. Now, if X and 2 or 1, we get 0.5 because 2 does not exist. But if we were to say 2 is equal to 1, then we get 1. So if X is true, which in this case if faded is true, and this right here has a value inside of it, then display this one here, so opacity. Otherwise, if this has no value inside of it, and this is false, then display this. So that's for that. Now we can copy this, and we can do the same for high score. So here we say high score. And now here, instead of dot score, we can say dot high underscore score. We can then make this 0. Yet again, 10, because it's going to be the same height. We can make it H5, because this shouldn't be the main attraction. The main attraction should be your score, so it's going to be a little bit smaller. Before we go, that right should be a center. And we can also change that 0.6 to 0.5. Cool, and that should draw it. So let's just save And then let's run it and see if it works, because that should theoretically draw it. Here we go. Attempt to index local save underscore data, nil value. You know why it's giving us that? It's giving us that because inside of the main.lua, if we go up here, we are not passing a value in here. So we don't have a high score. I'm just going to say 0 for now. And let's run it and see what we get. We still get a value, or still a problem. And my bad, this should be a table. High score. There we go. And that should be an equal symbol. There we go. Now it should finally work. New game. Now we have a high score, which is a little bit faded out because remember, the main attraction is actually the player and the asteroids. And then the score is also a little bit faded, but it's bigger because you might want to see your score more than what you see your high score. Alright. Now, one thing before we continue, this right here, quite unnecessary because all we need to do is we just need to get the data from globals. And we are already requiring globals. So all we need to do is, let's say, it can be maybe like the second thing it does. Local save underscore data is equal to, and we can just say read JSON and then save, because we want to read this file. And you can just take this save data and pass it in here. Or if you really want to save space, you can just do, whoops, my bad. You can just do that. But I like doing this just to make it more readable. Now let's make sure that works, because that should read the file for us. And then once it has read the file, we should see that value. So let's go up here and just run it. Okay, high score is 0. Let's keep a look out for that. If we change the high score to 900, what do we get? Do we get the same output, or did it change? Because it should be changing. New game, and there we go. Now we get 900. So we have successfully created a save file and read from that save file. Then last but definitely not least, we now have to modify the asteroids a little bit. Because when you blow up an asteroid, your score should increase. So let's go right here and we can say if self.radius is more or equal to asteroid size, then so the radius is more or equal to the basic asteroid size. Of course, that's a little bit big, so we want to go divided by 2 because asteroid size is from left to right whilst radius is halfway. Then game.score is then equal to itself, so game.score plus 20, and the game now has a score on it. If we go here, you can see there's the score plus 20. We can then go else if, and then we can go self.radius is less or equal to the min asteroid size. Then we can do the same thing as this, but because this asteroid will theoretically be the smallest asteroid you can get, we want to make them get a lot of points for destroying the small asteroids, because they can be difficult to shoot and they multiply, so they can also be very difficult to dodge at the same time. And then finally, for the medium-sized asteroids we can just say else, copy this, and instead of 100, we can say 50. And then this isn't something that's going to really affect us too much now, but we can also go if game.score is more than game.highscore. Then we want to say game.highscore is equal to game.score. Now this right here is basically whenever the player plays and their score is higher than the high score they have, then the high score will also increase along with their normal score. Kind of to tell them, hey, you are getting a new high score. Good job. And this here will of course just add a score, and we're already drawing the score to the screen, so we don't have to worry too much about that. We're going to just say love dot to run it, move it so everyone can see, start new game, shoot. You'll notice both of these, the high score and the score, increases because the score is higher than the high score. And of course, the more we destroy, the more we gain. Now, take note of this last part we added here. If we make the high score, let's say 100, then if we go back here, we say start new game, and we shoot an asteroid. My aim. As you can see, the high score didn't change, but the score did. And the high score won't change until our score is higher than the high score. Then you can see the high score is starting to change. Cool. And that is implementing a basic save or score system for our game. In the next tutorial, I believe we'll be doing the game over screen, so definitely stay tuned for that. Thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you all again in the next Love2D tutorial.